On the morning of June 10th, 1995, Detroit police responded to an emergency call made by a security guard at an abandoned warehouse. The guard reported several dead bodies and one survivor who refused to speak. When the officers arrived, the first thing they noticed was the deafening sound of music blasting from inside. The volume was so loud, they could hear it from their patrol car on the street. The song was identified as the Safety Dance by Men Without Hats, and it played on a loop for the entire duration of their time at the scene. As the officers entered the warehouse, it quickly became clear that the security guard had severely downplayed the seriousness of the situation. Inside, they found multiple dead bodies, each one horrifically mutilated. At least 3 of the bodies appeared to have been disarticulated, according to the incident report. The mutilation, combined with what appeared to be satanic symbols in the victim's clothing, style, and tattoos, led the officers to believe that the murders were part of a ritualistic and possibly occult event. The only survivor they found was a young man, likely between 18 and 22, who appeared very sick. He kept his face hidden, covering it with his hands. Despite the officers' attempts to speak with him, he refused to remove his hands. Though the survivor didn't speak, he was otherwise cooperative. He stood up when told, allowed the officers to search him, and followed their instructions without hesitation. But when they asked for his name, he only responded with laughter. In fact, every time they asked him anything, all he did was laugh and stay silent. The events that followed are still unclear. At some point, the young man lowered into a bow, then paused as if waiting for a reply. No response came. He bowed again. Finally, one of the officers crouched down and asked if he was okay. The young man laughed once more. Then he straightened up and took a step forward, leading with his right foot. And then he attacked. The attack was so brutal that the young man quickly fled the scene. About 2 hours later, he was captured by the AHH. The agency's personnel had been nearby due to the situation with inmate number 10 and were already in position to identify, track, and apprehend a second anomaly. When he was taken into custody, the young man immediately bowed to the officers. Now, the agency understands that this bow is part of his pattern, the first move in what they've come to call the copycat game. Back then, though, they had no idea what was going on. After the inmate initiated his game, things nearly went horribly wrong. T-Class Agent Alex B. was able to distract the entity long enough for the team to come up with the necessary field restraints and implement them on site. Not long after, both the young man and inmate number 10 were brought into agency custody. Important note, this inmate must be kept in full restraint at all times. Even when fully restrained, the inmate relentlessly attempts to start his game. If he manages to do so, anyone involved becomes a target, and the threat to their life becomes immediate and critical. The danger primarily comes from the complexity of the game. Unlike straightforward actions, the inmate forces participants to engage in intricate, dance-like routines that are incredibly difficult, if not outright impossible, for anyone to replicate. The penalty for failing to mirror the movements is a brutal, violent death. Therefore, it is absolutely essential to prevent the initiation of the copycat game at all costs. What makes the situation even more perilous is the inmate's obsessive drive to start the game. Nothing deters him. Even when locked in complete darkness, unable to move, and deprived of any kind of sensory input, he still tries to perform his opening move. This unyielding behavior puts anyone who interacts with him at constant risk. The inmate is a young man, appearing to be between 17 and 23 years old. Standing about 5 feet 5 inches with a muscular frame, his skin is mottled and decayed with patches of discoloration. He has no eyes. Instead of a normal nose, he possesses a snout-like formation with an open, gaping wound where a nose should be. Due to his unrelenting obsession and the grave threat he poses to personnel, the agency has long held that this inmate should be eliminated as soon as possible. On December 8, 2024, research staff at AHH NASCO developed a way to neutralize the inmate's abilities. This method renders him mortal while significantly reducing his unnatural strength, making him far less dangerous. Given the shortage of proper training opportunities for field agents, Commander John D. proposed using the inmate's termination as a training exercise for newly assigned staff. The interview transcript below was part of the agency's attempt to assess whether there was any chance of rehabilitating the inmate, essentially to see if he could be saved in some way. After reviewing the interview and all other relevant data, the agency concluded that rehabilitation was not possible and authorized the inmate's destruction. Approval was granted to carry out the inmate's termination as a training mission. The exercise was set for December 10, 2024, with Commander John D. and T-Class Agent Alex B. appointed as the instructors. The interviewer, however, strongly disagreed with the decision to terminate the inmate. She believed that rehabilitation was not only achievable, but probable. Following Commander John D.'s advice, the interviewer played the safety dance right before the interview, hoping it would trigger some kind of response. Since the song was playing during the inmate's initial discovery, the commander figured it might hold some significance for him and could open the door for conversation. The inmate's reaction, however, was not what they expected. Interview subject: the dancer. Classification: uncooperative / destructible / gay / critical / demon. Intervieweur: Rachel B. Jimsed. Interview date: December 10th, 24. I fucking hate that song. I hate it. Turn it off. Turn it off. Thank God. Thank you. Alright, here's the deal. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You want to know how I got there? Dance. All I ever wanted to do was dance. Yeah, go ahead, laugh. Plenty of people did. Little guy wants to be a ballerina? Huh? Whatever. I've heard it all. But they were all wrong. Dancing? It takes strength like you wouldn't believe. You don't get it unless you see it firsthand. Ever watched a dancer? Really watch one? You'll thank me later. But before you do that, ask yourself, do you think you could go toe-to-toe with them? You know what? I'll tell you right now, you couldn't. That was my childhood, surrounded by idiots who couldn't even last 5 minutes on Dance Dance Revolution, yet they kept trying to pick on me. I had to stand up to them, and I always won, even after I knocked out the 10 guys who tried before them. I never got it, and I still don't. All I can figure is that they just saw what they expected to see. They saw a tiny dance-obsessed kid, 5'5" on tiptoes, and figured I was an easy mark. But here's the thing. I'm no easy target. I'm not what they thought. Anyway, I grew up, got out of that dead-end town, and moved to the big city. I wish I could paint a picture of what it was like, describe the sights, the sounds, that feeling of freedom when you finally get to live life. I could talk about the friends I made, too. What it meant to finally have people who saw me for who I really was. Not as a target, a real community, not just some acquaintances. I found my group, I dove in, and I had the time of my life. Drinks, drugs, parties, the works. But the best part? Dancing. It was always about dancing. I'm still a dancer. That's the only thing that hasn't changed. It's the only part of me that's still here. My first memory? Waltzing across my mom's bedroom. I was so small my crib was still in the corner. I wish I could go back to that moment. Wake up right in the middle of it all and do everything differently. I found my people. The right people. We got together. Half the group was already there when I arrived, and the rest joined in later. And we just lived for every second. Parties, raves, practices, rehearsals, collaborations, ideas flowing constantly. We created something, a community that lived on the art we made. That was the best time of my life. I was exactly where I belonged. That's what I was doing the night. Everything went to hell. Just living my best life. My friends? They were amazing. But Jody? She was something else. She was more than a friend. More than a sister. She was my cosmic twin. My platonic soulmate. I miss her more than anything. The only good thing that came from that night was getting to help her. Jody was incredible, but not all of her friends were. You know what I mean? And because Jody was so incredible, those other people kind of just latched onto her, trying to get close to greatness. I don't know, maybe they were just desperate. Anyway, they started showing up at our gatherings all the time. At first, it wasn't so bad, but it got worse when they started taking over. And they did that a lot. That's why that night went south, because the ones who didn't belong crashed our party. It was just a regular night. A dance party, not quite a rave. Someone had set up speakers in an old warehouse and was blasting all kinds of 80s music. It was still fun, Just music, movement, and expression. The kind of vibe anyone in the creative scene would vibe with. The problem was, most of the not incredible people weren't artists. They didn't get it. When they showed up, they quickly got bored. That's what happened. Two of Jody's not incredibles got bored. I get it though. If you can't lose yourself in the music, if you can't stop worrying about how you look or how others see you, dancing isn't going to be fun. And no offense, but those guys, they couldn't do any of that. After a while, they wandered off into the back of the warehouse. I didn't want to notice them, but I did. I didn't bring them. I didn't like them. They weren't my problem. But when you grow up always being on edge, you develop a kind of sixth sense for these things. And the way they were acting, something felt wrong. So I watched them. They kept leaving and coming back to the dance floor, disappearing into the back again. Then, they started grinning this awful, creepy smile. That's when I followed them. I found them at the back, behind a pile of old machinery. They were laughing at this homeless guy, passed out on the floor. He'd been there so long, there was dust in his hair. His hands were covering his face, which was odd. But the weirdest part? He was huge, like 6 feet tall, maybe taller, and dressed ridiculously. An old, ragged suit with a cummerbund, tailcoat, and a top hat. Stains everywhere. It wasn't just homeless. It looked like a joke. I tried to approach casually, but they barely noticed me. They were too busy tormenting the guy, kicking his feet, stepping on his hands, messing with his hat. Finally, the guy stirred. He sat up, still covering his face, and made this whimpering sound, like a sick dog. One of the not incredibles squatted down, copying him, covering his own face and pretending to cry. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked. They just laughed. The homeless guy rolled onto his back, still hiding his face, kicking his feet in the air like some kind of twisted turtle. Not incredible number 2 copied him, laughing so hard he was choking. Then the guy sat up again. They dragged him to his feet, but he was limp, still hiding his face. At that point, I was seriously creeped out. Before I could say anything, they dragged him back out to the dance floor. No one was happy about the interruption, but they were too caught up in the excitement. "Look at this!" they shouted. "Check it out! This is amazing!" And because what else can you do when someone hijacks your party? Everyone stopped and watched as the homeless guy started kicking his feet into the air. Not incredible number 2 did the same, laughing his ass off. Then the homeless guy bent forward, stretching his arms, still keeping his hands over his face. Not incredible number 2 did it too. After that, the guy turned around to face the crowd just as that goddamn safety dance started playing. I fucking hate that song. I hate it. As I watched, he dropped into this low, exaggerated bow, still hiding his face. "Come on!" Not incredible number 2 yelled. "He wants us all to play. Group game." Right on cue, the homeless guy extended one leg. And like idiots, we all followed along. Then he extended the second leg. And we all copied him again. The people around me were laughing, but I wasn't. It wasn't that I was some sort of stick in the mud, but honestly, this whole thing was starting to make my stomach turn. Growing up in a place with a lot of homeless people, I'd gotten used to them. Some of them I even knew by name. But this was something else. It was just plain wrong. The homeless guy, or whatever he was, pulled off another move. It was ridiculous. Some kind of slide that you'd expect to see at a cheesy dance recital, except he couldn't use his hands. His hands were still stuck to his face, like they were glued there. Not Incredible 2 went along with the move, copying it like the rest of us. But Not Incredible 1? He lost it completely, cracking up and falling on the floor in a heap. Right then, the homeless guy yanked his hands away from his face, and what I saw made my skin crawl. His face, it wasn't even a face anymore, was just a mess of decaying skin, like a dead animal, hollow eyes staring out like something that had been rotting for too long. And then, before anyone could even process what was happening, he pounced on Not Incredible 1, tearing his face off like it was nothing. I've always had a target on my back. The thing about being a target is that you get good at figuring out how to stop being one. Sometimes it's about fighting back. Sometimes it's about getting the hell out of there. Other times, it's just about going along with it. So, while the rest of the crowd ran screaming for the exits, I stood my ground and kept watching. I wasn't the only one. There were about 12 of us still standing, including Jody. I don't like making assumptions, but after seeing everyone who stuck around, I could tell. These people weren't strangers to being targets either. The homeless guy covered his face again and shuffled back to the front of the room. When he bent down, I did the same. Jody did too. So did the others who didn't bail. The ones who ran? They didn't even notice the next move. And, of course, Mr. Homeless went after them. It was like he was having a blast. He moved towards some of them slowly, like Frankenstein, arms out, shuffling with his body. To others, he pounced quick as a jaguar. And then, without warning, he launched himself through the air, like he was some kind of twisted Batman. It was terrifying, sure, but it was so violent and out of control that it almost didn't feel real. It was insane. He ripped off heads, tore limbs off like a bratty kid, ripping wings off flies. One girl? He bent her back until she snapped like a dry cracker. When you're in a crisis, your brain comes up with some weird shit. And that's exactly what mine did when I saw her break. A human graham cracker. And if you want to get real gross, she was a full-on S-more with what spilled out of her when she cracked. Once he was done with the runners, the homeless guy shuffled back to the DJ table and pulled another move. The 12 of us who were still alive, still sane, mimicked it. And the next one. And the next. And the next. Even as the air thickened with the stench of blood and guts. Even as puddles of blood spread across the floor, soaking our shoes. And it was one of those blood puddles that took out the next guy. He was keeping up fine, better than I was, but then he slipped in the blood and fell into some kind of half-split position. Mr. Homeless froze. His hands, still glued to his face, didn't move. Then, in a heartbeat, he jumped. He slammed down on that kid's chest like it was a hollow chocolate bunny, crushing him. Blood, guts, bone, it all sprayed out, covering me. Mr. Homeless stood up straight, stomped a couple more times for good measure, like a kid squashing a bug, and then headed back to the table. He dropped into a squat and raised his elbows. We copied him. The longer it went on, the harder it got. I wouldn't say he was trying to make us do anything too complicated. But when your brain is fried from fear, and adrenaline's got your stomach in knots, and you're slipping in your friend's blood or someone else's guts, simple movements start feeling like puzzles. I'll never forget which was worse. The way he hid his face when we were all playing the game right, or the horror of what happened when someone messed up. We all made it through the first few routine moves. I guess he figured that wasn't enough, so he started pulling full dance routines. Multi-step, choreographed numbers. That's when I thought, maybe, just maybe, I could actually survive this. Routines are just dances. And I can dance. I don't even have to think about it. I just know how to move. The next person to go didn't even make a mistake. She had a full panic attack, shrieking like she'd lost her mind. The choreographer didn't waste any time. He killed her so fast, her screams still echoed for a second after she was gone. After that, the routines got crazier. Harder. At one point, we lost 4 people in just as many moves. The destruction made me throw up, but at least I managed to puke between rounds. The guy next to me slipped on my puke. He didn't even have time to react before the choreographer leapt onto him and crushed his skull like a pumpkin. My God, there were 6 of us left. Then 5. The next one died because she tried to fight back. I'm not sure what she was thinking. Maybe she thought we were all trapped in some weird bubble of magic, that if she hit him just right, she could break it like he did to us. But she didn't even get close. She launched herself at him, got a hold of him around the waist, and was dead before she even hit the ground. What he did to her was worse than anything. Her body exploded into pieces, raining down for what felt like forever. One of her teeth got stuck in my hair. Her attempt must have pissed him off, because the next routine was brutal. A full-on dance number that felt like it never ended. 2 more lost that round. The first one went quick, but the second one? He let her suffer. He made her scream, dragged it out, and then killed her slowly. And then it was just Jody and me. We were both exhausted. You could see it in her, sweat-soaked clothes, muscles locked up from the strain, blood and guts smeared across our bodies. But she was worse, shaking like a leaf. I knew if he pulled another hard routine, she'd be done. So, while he gleefully tore apart the last loser, I grabbed Jody's hand and ran. It was almost dawn. The sky was that soft, pale gold color, like the first light of a perfect summer morning. That gave me hope. For just a second, I thought maybe we'd made it. But as the song looped again, the choreographer jumped into another routine. And this one was long, complicated, and because we were running, we were already out of the game. But the routine was so long that he was still going, while Jody and I were already halfway across the warehouse. We reached the door, and I looked back just in time to see him coming at us fast. I shoved Jody out the door. She collapsed on the sidewalk, knee cracking on the pavement. Even after everything, hearing that sound still makes me shudder. The sunlight spilled out, warming the street. The choreographer yanked me back inside the warehouse. The door slammed shut as Jody screamed. I braced myself to be turned into pulp, broken like a pumpkin, smashed into a bloody mess. None of that happened. The choreographer grabbed me by the hands, pulling me close. He pressed that rotting face against mine. And then he shrank. His face changed. The snout receded. His eyes filled the hollow sockets. His skin healed. Not perfectly, but at least it looked alive. Not like a corpse. I wasn't looking at a monster anymore. Just some tired guy, someone who could have been anyone. With real, gut-wrenching horror, I realized the awful truth. This guy, this thing that was happening to me was nobody. He hadn't been a monster or a force of nature. He'd been some unlucky guy out for a good time on a Friday night, stumbling into the wrong place at the wrong moment. Just like me, he bolted, turned, and ran like hell. I tried to follow, but when I stepped outside, all I heard was Jody scream. I saw her scramble away from me, her eyes full of terror. Not just fear, but hatred too, something I didn't recognize. No one had ever looked at me like that. Not before. That's when I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass. But it wasn't me staring back. It was him, the choreographer. At that moment, I thought surviving the night meant I'd won. That's what they told us, right? Stay alive until the morning, and you make it out. But that's just a lie. Surviving until dawn doesn't mean victory. It means you swap places with the winner. I knew that deep down from the start. That's why I've always made my games impossible to win. It's better to be dead than to become this. Ever since that night, my life's been over. It ended long before it should have. Talking to you, though, it's kind of nice. It feels like a break, even though we're talking about this nightmare. But once we're done, it's back to being that thing. To pulling moves and setting up the next trap, planning how to make you play until you screw up. It's like a high, a rush. Only worse because it's all me. It's only me. It was never supposed to go this way. I just wanted a night out. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted a life, you know? But I ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't even know where to start with this. I found out the agency had been trying to get rid of this kid for ages, but they just couldn't crack it. Every attempt ended badly. Too many dead agents, too many botched operations, so they backed off for a while. But then, on December 8th, they figured out how to neutralize him, and they went all in. The death sentence was in full swing. They had me interview him on December 10th, but they didn't say why at the time. I didn't get it. After everything I saw in that interview, how could they even consider killing him? I said as much. They told me they'd take it under advisement, but I really thought they'd be discussing it for days. So when Alex showed up to escort me downstairs just a few hours later, I didn't think much of it. He wasn't exactly smiling, but he wasn't his usual cold self either. Had a good day? I asked. He just shrugged. I helped number 19 today. Like I said, helping's my favorite part of the job. I laughed. Is it really that important for you to be the hero in every story? All the pretty girls thinking you're awesome? He raised an eyebrow. Yes, but it's even better when the unpretty one thinks so. It took me a second to catch on. Wait, really? Why? Are you offended? His imitation of my voice was spot on. Too good to even be mad at. You should be flattered. I smirked. You know what? I think I am. We kept walking, the sound of music pounding through the floors. By the time we descended 2 flights of stairs, the walls were shaking from the thumping beats. Alex held open the door to the next room. More like an arena, really. It was massive. The music hit me like a freight train. I couldn't even tell what it was at first. Staff members were everywhere. Field agents, the commander Violetta, and a few others I recognized by face but didn't know well enough to name. What's going on? I shouted over the noise. Training arena. Move up, Alex said, nodding toward the seats. before they see you gawking. I followed him to the front row. Love was sitting in one seat, Mikey in another. He was pale, drenched in sweat, trembling like he was about to pass out. Love gave me a strained smile. Tears had soaked through their blindfold. They told me I had to participate. They shouted above the noise. But Violetta stepped in. Isn't she great? I looked down into the arena, trying to focus on the center. That's when I saw the dancer, huddled in the middle, trembling, face covered. The music hit me then, a sick realization washed over me. I recognized it, the Mortal Kombat theme, and that's when it hit me. I finally understood what was happening. Just as my panic began to spike, Damon marched in, slamming the music off with a swift motion. What the hell's going on in here? A wave of relief washed over me. Damon was the guy who could fix this. He was on our side. Like me. He got us. He cared about the inmates. He was the reason the psych program even existed. He was the one who'd help make things better, even when no one else had. One of the agents I didn't recognize gave a wide grin. What do you think it looks like? Come join the fun, Damon. I was sure Damon would tear him down. He always did. But instead, he smiled, shrugged off his jacket, and hopped into the chaos without hesitation. What the hell? I whispered. What is he doing? He was a commander too, Mikey muttered. Youngest one ever. Until he messed up. But he's not like them. He's a reason. He helps. He's one of them. Did you forget who they are? Mikey shot back. Or who you are. 'Cause trust me, they haven't forgotten. I spun around to Alex. Why the hell did you bring me here? Because they told me to, Alex said flatly. I'm supposed to explain what they're doing to him, why they're doing it, and which parts were wrong. Then I'm supposed to go fix it. But that's not happening today. Before I could process that, the agents in the arena sprang into action. It was awful, like watching a game of soccer, except the ball was a person. The violence wasn't just extreme, it was unsettlingly ordinary. Fast, brutal, but in a way that made it almost look fake. If you weren't watching closely, you could almost miss it. Then the blood started. It spilled within 10 seconds, and another 30 before the first scream echoed. That's when Alex shot up from his seat and dove into the fray. The others backed off, cheering and howling like it was all some kind of twisted game. They parted like the Red Sea as Alex approached the dancer. At first, I didn't get it. Nothing in his posture screamed killer. The dancer looked up at him and gave a subtle nod. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe there was a way out of this. Then, without warning, Alex lunged, snapping the dancer's neck with a sickening crack. The dancer crumpled to the floor like a rag doll, and the room fell dead quiet. Then, what the hell? A chorus of confusion, anger, and disbelief erupted, but no cheers. Just disappointment. The commander stomped forward, his eyes blazing. Did you misunderstand the point of tonight? No, Alex said, standing tall. Are you sure? Did you realize you just messed up a training exercise? Did you forget who I am? The field agent who'd called Damon to play sneered. Is that what it is? Someone's teaching your old dog some new tricks? Or is he just losing it? I haven't forgotten anything, Alex snapped. I remember exactly where I am and what I'm dealing with. The room went still again. I told you, Mikey whispered. He's the only one who cares what happens to us. No matter how many times they try to break him, he's the only one who hasn't. All right, Alex said briskly. The target's been eliminated. Training's done. Good night. He turned sharply and began to walk away, signaling for us to follow. Love stood up first, tears soaking through their blindfold. Then Mikey. Then me. The commander's voice broke through the silence like a whip. Stay. All of you. I hesitated, but Alex spun around. His face twisted into something monstrous, unrecognizable. He shoved me forward, hurting us out of the room. Once the door slammed shut behind us, Mikey muttered, "They're sending you back downstairs." Alex just shrugged. He looked drained for the first time since I'd met him. They'll do what they want when they want. What about us? I asked. You'll be fine. What about them? I gestured toward Love and Mikey. Alex didn't respond. He walked us down the hall to our rooms, wordlessly. When we got to my door, I turned to him. Thank you. He didn't answer, but I could hear him settling in at the front of the hallway, standing guard. That was 2 days ago. I was only allowed out of my room this afternoon. No one's bothered to explain why. I'm not expecting them to. There's nothing more to say. I haven't seen the commander since. I've seen Damon, but he's been distant, cold, so out of character it's unnerving. Alex, Mikey, and Love are still around, which is some comfort. Most of the field agents have left, but Violetta stayed behind. Most notably, all the T-Class personnel are still in their cells. I haven't been told when they'll be sent back out. The only reason I'm not panicking is that I have a packed interview schedule for the next 2 weeks. After that, I don't know.